It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome. It is the Jill on Money show, and we are so delighted that you are joining us this Mother's Day weekend. I just reminded Mark about Mother's Day. Everyone out there, call your moms. Make sure if you're married to a mom that you make a little bit of an effort, maybe an extra effort this year. Parents are doing yeoman's tasks, playing teacher and employee and everything at once. It's amazing. We are broadcasting from the Capital One virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? It's very exciting. This has been it's kind of a little bit of a downer of a week in some respects in that, we got that bankruptcy filing from J. Crew, and we had that Labor Department employment report that was, as pretty much as awful as you could imagine. Millions of people out of work in the month of April, unemployment rate shooting sky high. All right, take a deep breath because that's all happening. But it is backward looking. So maybe I think that in the future, hopefully, that April and May will be kind of the worst of the economic statistics. And then things start to slowly pick up from there. That's our hope. And our job here is to try to take the mystery out of your financial lives. And the way that we do that is we try to answer your questions. Now, we haven't been doing as many calls because we're working remotely. Maybe we'll try to weave in some calls in the future. Things kind of settle down a little bit. But at the very least, all you need to do to get a question answered is to send us an email. It's askjill@jillonmoney.com. askjill@jillonmoney.com. If you're on our website, jillonmoney.com, you can just click the contact button and that will get you to us. So let's get into some questions because I know this is kind of the time where we want to spend this time with you. We will have a guest in the second hour. We're trying to find some programming to lift up your spirits a little bit and find some good interviews that we have conducted in the past. We'll get to that in the next hour. But right now, your questions. Here is from Angela. She is asking about a Roth IRA. She says, I recently started listening to your podcast. Oh, wait, one little moment here. You're listening to the radio show, but we have a daily podcast as well. It's called Jill on Money, and you can download that anywhere you get podcasts. It's very easy to do. So subscribe to that podcast, Jill on Money, and we'll be able to talk every single day. It's fantastic. Okay, let me get back to Angela. I recently started listening to your podcast. It's a reprieve during an otherwise difficult time. Thank you for being a voice of reason and support. I am in a relatively stable financial position given all things considered. I'm seeking advice about how best to be strategic in terms of investments. First, a bit about me. I am a single 42-year-old woman with no dependents. My salary this year before taxes is close to $145,000. My job seems relatively stable. That's good. As of last year, I own an investment property that covers all of my expenses, mortgage, condo fees, tax escrow. I currently rent my primary place of residence. Okay. Historically, I've always been aggressive about saving. I maximize my contributions annually based on the federal limits on 403b, health savings accounts, and Roth IRA rules by dollar cost averaging over the year. Fantastic. This is like a gold star case right now. There are my dogs. They're telling that you're doing a great job there. I have no debt other than a mortgage and otherwise save aggressively. Since coronavirus, I have attempted to be more aggressive in terms of investing she means not aggressive in how the investment, she's saying more aggressive in her saving. I've attempted to be more aggressive and have contributed to date over $2,000 to my Roth IRA with the annual contribution limit being $6,000. My question now relates to my Roth. It turns out I may be too close this year based on my salary and rental income to be eligible to contribute to a Roth. I want to take advantage of the down economy by investing aggressively to the extent possible. Since I may wind up being ineligible to contribute to a Roth IRA, do you suggest that instead of contributing to my Roth, I park the money on a dollar cost averaging basis in a separate taxable long term investment account? As I mentioned, I already maximized my 403B and HSA. I'm trying to avoid a situation where I am with good intentions, dollar cost averaging, only to find out next year when I file my taxes that I was ineligible to contribute to a Roth, thus losing out on all the potential gains from the downturn in the economy. Does my thinking make sense? Should I stop contributing to my Roth now and instead use that money to contribute to a taxable retirement account? And then when I do my taxes for 2020, I could always catch up by investing the full remaining Roth IRA amount if it turns out that I am, in fact, eligible for Roth based on the applicable deductions. Does my approach make sense? Any other suggestions besides consulting with an accountant? Thank you in advance. I think that this is perfect. Mark and I are always telling folks that even though we do absolutely love the Roth, undoing contributions is kind of a drag. So what you're facing is maybe you would have somewhat of a phase out depending on what that tax return looks like. Because in 2020, as a single filer, you can contribute to a Roth up to $139,000 of income. So it kind of depends on how much. I mean, if you're maxing out your 403B, meaning that you're putting away $19,500 into that account, it may be that you're fine. It may be that you're phased out because the phase out begins at 124,000. But we'll have to see. And so for the time being, I like the idea certainly of dollar cost averaging. Do that. And I would say I'm presuming just because you are a good saver that you probably have a savings account. But it is good to know, frankly, that you are solidly in the 24% tax bracket. So even if you paid taxes and then put money into the investment account, it's not the worst thing in the world that you paid taxes at the 24% federal tax level. I don't know what state you live in, but I think that this is a good game plan. It makes sense to me. And for those of you who are listening, if you're on the cusp of a Roth, now might be a time to just sort of chill out. You can still save the money, you can still put the money to work elsewhere, but you would then top it off later. And I think that's a smart way to think about this. All right? Makes sense? Glad it makes sense. Makes sense to me. I like when things make sense. Okay, you're listening to the Jill on Money show. And if you have a financial question, if you have an economic question, if you have a question about some of the various coronavirus rescue efforts by the government and how to navigate them, please feel free to send us an email. Our address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. And when you go to the website, jillonmoney.com, don't forget you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. We'd love for you to do that. Okay, it's Jill on Money. When we return, more of your questions. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we sure would love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. When you go onto our website, you are going to see so much great stuff. And part of that has to do with Mark being just the best executive producer ever. Part of it has to do with the fact that I am compulsive and working my butt off. Oh, I know, not poor me. I'm just saying I am compulsive. You can watch some of the television segments that I have done. You can read some of the stuff that I have written. This past week, I decided to do a pretty deep dive into estate planning amid coronavirus. And so when you read that, I hope it snaps you into doing something around your estate planning. And I went out, I actually interviewed an estate attorney. I really wanted to figure out what the heck is the difference between a do not intubate and a do not resuscitate order, and whether or not it's worth having that at your parents' homes if something, God forbid, were to happen, or in your own home, and how that should be managed. I think these are really different times, gang, and if we're not using this time to rethink some of the things that we should have been doing all along. I know we should have been doing it, but maybe you didn't. Then we are letting an opportunity to help ourselves and our families slip by. So, my, I mean, I'm hopeful that I don't want to be all down, but like, if you're not doing estate planning during the pandemic, you're probably never going to do it. So it's pandemic estate planning. You'll see it under the read column. I think, Mark, I'll put it when I eventually get this posted and ready for you. I think I'll put that under the area of the resources as well. Just we'll double post it in case people are looking around for it. How's that? Okay. All right, so let's get to your questions. Remember, you can always email us, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Christian, wow, what an interesting spelling. Christian writes, thank you hi, Jill and Mark. You know, I love when you include Mark. Thank you so much for continuing to be a consistent source of information while everything else seems to continue to change on a daily basis. Me, my mom, and my dog have been learning so much and appreciate the time and effort you're putting into keeping us informed and providing sound advice. I'm also happy to hear each day that you are doing well and staying safe. We are doing the same. This may be a long one, so get comfy. Ha! I'm comfy. I'm ready. I'm in my early 30s, single, and have only started to truly pay attention to and understand my financial health last year. That's when I discovered your podcast. Better late than never, right? Current situation. I'm on a debt-free journey with a total of $91,881.31 remaining in debt. I moved back in with my mother since starting this journey to save money and to help each other out in a more meaningful way. I've taken over her mortgage payment of $1,000 a month. We share a number of other bills like phone, car insurance, utilities. However, my mother has been furloughed until June with no pay. She does continue to have benefits, so that changes our household income a bit. Okay, I'm still employed and received a 10% pay cut in an effort to avoid layoffs. I'm grateful to be part of an organization that has made adjustments to help its employees and the community we serve. With these changes, I'm looking for some general advice on how to approach this situation. My gut tells me to be conservative, to save as much as I can for as long as I can. But I'm also wondering, should I continue to make extra payments towards my high interest credit card debts, at least, although it may not be as much as I'd been able to pay prior to the pandemic? Okay, I have $2,000 in savings. I have company stock currently valued at $1,000. Okay, you want to know what let's talk about the debt. Listen, the lion's share of the debt is federal student loan, 73 grand, 0% until September 30th. Then we've got two private student loans, which total about $14,000 at 5%, two credit card accounts, which are about $4,000 at 25%. Mortgage it belongs to my mother, $118,000, fixed interest rate of 5.5%. Should we refinance this loan? A friend of mine told me she's placing her mortgage in forbearance. Her loan company will defer payments for 3 months, waive interest, and tack 3 months to the length of the loan. I don't know the details of her circumstances and don't presume they're the same as mine. So, Considering my personal finances, I took a more conservative route by taking care of our basic needs, dropping back to the minimum payments on my debts while saving as much as I can, especially since we're now a single income household. Nothing remains certain right now, and although I'm grateful to have a job, I've experienced 2 back-to-back layoffs while the economy was on the mend after the 2008 recession. This time around, I'm going to remain more informed, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I'm still curious as to know your view on my friend's approach to reallocating her now deferred mortgage payment. Do you think my mother and I would benefit from deferring loan payments for our home and my student loan? Okay, so let me answer that first. Yes, I do. Here's the question I would wonder about with your mom, okay? So you said that you're 30 in your 30s. You don't talk so much about how old your mom is. You do say that she's furloughed. Do we really think she's going to get back and reemployed? That's number one. Okay. Number two, mom's been furloughed. Has she applied for unemployment? She should, and she absolutely should make sure she gets money for that. Number three, does mom have any savings at all herself? I'd like to know that. Now, back to the question. Um, yes, I think you should ask for forbearance since the mortgage loan is in your mom's name, and she should find out what the forbearance terms would be. With your friend putting that mortgage in forbearance, it's a pretty simple equation. I just defer my payments and I get it longer time at the end of the loan. So I think that that's fine. That's great. But we want to understand if mom were to call up the mortgage company, what would the terms be? In terms of a refi, it depends. How much more time is left on this loan? Right. And I don't know if mom's going to be able to refi if she doesn't get that job back. So there's that. Okay. So number one, yes, forbearance. So now, if we do choose to do a mortgage forbearance, the new owner of our loan is offering to defer loan payments for 3 months, then assess repayment options at the end of that period. That makes me uncomfortable. They could decide from a number of options. Okay. So what I would do is this. I would ask for forbearance. I would keep the money, and all I would do is I would just pile money in cash as much as possible. Okay. And then at the end of that 3 months, at least the cash is there. And maybe if it's an extension, it works out great. But if not, you have money set aside. Okay. So what I think you need to be doing is stockpiling cash, which you are doing. What's up with the company stock? The $1,000. I'm interested in that. I would absolutely look at that and maybe even sell it if possible. And I want to know more about mom's finances. Can you follow up and tell me a little bit about what she has and what's going on? The house, what it's worth. I'd like to get a better sense of the overall situation before offering even more advice. I think it's a great game plan, and I so appreciate this. I'm just going to end with what Christian wrote at the end because I think it's so nice, and I love hearing it. So, Mark, check this out. Thanks again for your podcast. I love your whole vibe. Trustworthy with a genuine desire to help your listeners. No fluff, no doom and gloom, just sharing your knowledge and perspective. I really appreciate you guys. Sincerely, Kristen. Isn't that nice? Well, thank you, Christian. Follow up with us. We want to give you more and better advice. Okay, you're listening to Jill on Money. If you too have a financial question like Kristen, just send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. And during the break, hop onto the website, jillonmoney.com. And maybe if you've got a job and you've got money, why don't you order my book, The Dumb Things Smart People Do With Their Money, 13 Ways to Right Your Financial Wrongs. We'll be right back.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. It's Mother's Day weekend. So, get busy with mom. Send something. Maybe just call. A little Zoom action. I think everyone's getting over the whole Zoom thing, frankly. I think it's one of those, it was like, oh, it's nice, and actually the phone works just as well. I'm not one who needs to see the face. It's just me. But you might be. That's cool. No worries. If you've got a financial question, love to hear from you. Love to. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. And if you've got a question while you're poking around the website, we've got a little contact button. It's in the upper right-hand corner. Go to jillonmoney.com. That's our website. Got lots of great stuff there. You can watch TV segments, listen to old shows, check out the resource section. I think that's great. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Here's a question from Bill. Subject, CFP certification after retirement. Oh, brother, this is someone who's got a lot of time to spare. Hi, Jill. I'm planning to retire at the end of 2021. Finance is an area of interest to me, and so I am considering getting certified as a financial planner. This is something I can do part-time to earn a little cash and help people better understand their financial options. To be completely transparent, this would be more of a hobby and the chance to do something new. I do not need this job in order to retire comfortably. Would you recommend pursuing a CFP certification since this is your area of expertise? I love the show. I subscribe to your podcast and especially appreciate your warm, calming nature. Hear that, Mark? Warm and calming, if they only knew. Stay safe and healthy. Best regards, Bill. Bill, I am a CFP professional, as is Mark. And it's not a perfect certification. Nothing is, but I really like to believe that it is the gold standard in terms of how we should approach providing financial advice. Okay. And I think that what's really important when you consider the CFP is to really know that it is a holistic approach to financial planning. And it ain't easy. It's just not, you know? And it's something that as much as I feel like it's really cool. You learn so much. I think it's totally um, a great thing. It's a real commitment. I mean, if you're going to do it part time, Mark did it part time, but he worked really hard. So, I mean, I think it's great. I really do. I think it's a very it's an important certification, and I think you'll learn a ton. And frankly, if you were to do this and it's really just like a post retirement career, there's all sorts of things that you can do with it. You probably could get involved with a nonprofit that tries to provide financial advice as well. I think, Bill, I say it's awesome. Go for it. It's like Mark didn't get the CFP certification to necessarily go out and provide financial advice for a living, although he could, except for that part where he has to go get clients. But I would do that for him. But I will tell you that he really felt so much more, I think, secure in some of the things he knew were sort of the right answers to questions, that he sort of brings that certification into his job, and he's fantastic. And it's a great idea. Okay. All right. Dara writes, Hi, Jill. Love your show and advice. My question is, which fund should I withdraw money from if I lose my job? Which I anticipate will happen in the next few weeks. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, of course, I would use money market cash first, then plan on withdrawing about $60,000 per year. Could you suggest a withdrawal strategy in general? We have no debt, we own our home. Our biggest expense is medical, and insurance does not cover treatments. Okay, here's my situation as of mid-April. Age 67, married, currently working. Husband, age 74, retired. Here's what they have coming in. They've got pension income, Social Security, and employer salary after tax. She was making, let's see, $87,000. So right now, it looks to me they will have, let's see, 67, 787. They'll have about $95,000 a year in income when she retires. Retirement funds in my name total about 1.45 million. Haven't taken any money out. She's got IRA account, inherited IRA, Roth IRA. Then she's got retirement funds in spouse's name, not that much, and non-retirement accounts, about 800,000. Brokerage account, some stocks. I was planning on selling these when I stopped working and my tax bracket was lower. Okay, so first and foremost, number one, absolutely, as soon as you stop working, sell those stocks and make sure keep the money for capital gains, because it sounds like there's going to be a lot, and pop that right into your money market account, which will have tons of money and ready to rock and roll. And then the general scheme is to make sure you have enough money in your non-retirement funds in cash to cover whatever your needs are for the upcoming year. One thing I wasn't so sure of reading about this story, which is great, by the way, you've done an amazing job, is what is it you need to pull every year to augment your income? But in general, I would say non-retirement funds, that's what you're going to do first. And, like you said, you can sell these two individual stocks. Perfect time to do it is when you don't have income. And then you're going to really work in those non-retirement funds to free up the cash you need every year and keep it in the money market account. The next part will be the money in your husband's retirement funds. That will come next. Then your IRA accounts. And last but not least, your Roth IRA. I don't think you're going to need to get there. You have plenty of money. Sounds like you're in great shape. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, that's yet another segment in the can. Fantastic. It's Jill on Money, and we are working hard to try to take the mystery out of your financial life. Please send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com, and we'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, it's an economic question, it's a PPP CARES Act question, it's anything that's on your mind, why don't you give us a holler? Why not? It's just so easy. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. That's it. Piece of cake, baby. Piece of cake. You know what I was thinking, Mark, is that maybe we're going to have to get our friend Ed Slott back on the program come June or July, because July 15th is the new tax filing deadline. So maybe we're going to have to or we're going to have to resurrect some of that tape so that we can provide people with lots of guidance. I think people are going to be just blowing through these deadlines, not remembering. It's hard to remember July 15th. I know. It's going to be really weird. But July 15th, tax filing deadline. So if you've got a tax question in advance of that, love to hear from you. Okay? All right, let me answer some questions here. This is from Jim, who enjoys reading our column in the Syracuse newspaper. Jim's 77 years old, and he says, I know I don't have to take my required minimum distribution in 2020, but what about the inherited IRA I received after my sister's death? I received it in 2015, and we've taken the RMD each year based on her life cycle. Do I have to take hers in 2020? I am not sure about that. I'm going to say that you probably don't. On the other hand, if it's not a ton of money, maybe I would take it anyway. Why not? I mean, Depends on, I'll do a little IRS poking around, but I bet that all RMDs would be treated the same. But if not, I'll let you know. I'll look it up after the show. Deal? That seems fair. Thanks for writing, Jim. Um, don't forget, you do not have to take your required minimum distributions this year. Mike writes, okay, if and when a second stimulus package is enacted, how will the $4 trillion addition to the country's debt be paid off? Will taxes rise? What kind of time frame are we looking at? How will it affect the general economy? Thanks for your insight. Well, Mike, I think that there's almost no doubt in anyone's mind that coming out of this crisis, clearly the federal government will recoup some taxes, right? They haven't collected taxes. And when you have a recession, tax receipts go down. So that'll be one piece of it. Another piece of it will be that likely taxes will rise. I don't know how quickly. No one's going to say, I'm running on a platform or I'm running for reelection based on raising your taxes because this country's in a terrible position. I think the time horizon, best as I can get to, I would say within the next 10 or 20 years. And specifically, I bet it's more like 10 years. Taxes are going to go up. They just are. I'm sorry. There's no way that we get all of the social safety nets that we have, plus kind of lift the country out of the balance sheet problem that's occurring right now without raising taxes. And, taxes had been cut to the lowest level in history, essentially. So I would expect taxes are rising. It's one of the reasons that we are very strong supporters of using the Roth IRA and converting assets into Roth assets while tax rates and brackets are low. Pamela writes that she's got a retirement plan that's going to be terminated. And she says, what should I do with the funds? I am 61. I plan on working until I'm 70. Should I opt for a direct rollover into an IRA or into my current 403b? Perhaps there are other options. Investments? Okay. You should definitely do a direct rollover. The question is the current 403b a good plan? So what I would like to know is who administers the current 403b? If it is a good company that provides low-cost options, sure, that's fine. But if you've got one of these 403bs, like a lot of teachers have these plans, which are kind of rotten plans, frankly, and they're with insurance companies and they're larded up with fees, then I would choose a direct rollover into an IRA rollover account. Where could you do that? You could do that wherever you find cheap options. So that could be everything from T. Rowe Price or TD Ameritrade or Fidelity or Vanguard or Charles Schwab. You may choose a robo-advisor like a Betterment or a Wealthfront, which gives you a little advice. But again, I would only say that you should go to a direct rollover to an IRA rollover if the plan you currently have, Pamela, is not a great one. And if you just send us a quick follow-up, we can take a look at that and tell you what we think. Okay, Gary wants to know, he says, I haven't looked at my TSP since the virus crashed the market. I had 500 grand in my TSP, mostly traditional, 20 grand as Roth. I'll be 64 this year, not retire till age 70. Should I invest in Roth for my last 6 years of retirement? I know you need more information. I wanted your suggestion with this information. Taxes during retirement is a question. You know what, Gary? I would say this. With 6 years to go, just keep doing what you're doing and follow up with us if you have more questions about the actual investments. Sounds like you're on the right track. If you've got a financial question, just send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Hey, during the break, have a good look over at my friend Beth Kobliner's website, bethkobliner.com. We need to talk college. A lot of big college decisions being made right now. Okay, we'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. And before we conclude the first hour of I was about to say the last hour, I'm losing my mind here. Before we conclude the hour, just want to remind you that we are broadcasting from the Capital One virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? A lot of people ask questions, by the way, about getting more interest on their accounts. Don't forget, this is not a plug for the sponsor, but I see their name pop up quite a bit. But, go to depositaccounts.com if you want to start to improve the amount of interest you receive on some of your interest-bearing accounts. It's a great website. They do a great job of aggregating. Dan writes, with the value of my IRA currently so low, I want to move money from it to my Roth. Great idea. So here's the question. Is it possible to spread a withdrawal, meaning move to an IRA this year, over the next 3 years for tax purposes? Or does the move get done in 3 equal parts over 3 years? Okay. Whatever you withdraw from your IRA to convert will be taxed in the year that you withdraw it. That's the rule, Dan. So it's not like you can pull the whole thing out right now, the value's down, and then you can start throwing some money in 1 year, 2020, 2021, and 2022. So whatever you pull out right now, it's taxable to you. All right. And whatever you then decide to convert, you've got to have the money to pay the taxes. So just think of it this way. Only pull out the amount of money this year that you have the cash on hand outside of this account to pay the taxes on, and then it goes into the Roth. That's how the Roth conversion works. Okay? So you can do a little bit at a time. And remember, if you've got other IRA accounts, that can actually make this whole thing a little bit hinky. So be careful. All right? All right, we've got a great treat for you for hour number 2. We are pulling out some great interviews from the archives and an awesome one coming up. We're trying to help you with your binge watching, and this is going to be a great help. You are listening to Jill on Money. When we return, a fantastic interview. That's your tease. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's hour number 2 of the Jill on Money show. Let me give you a little visual here, gang. I've got 2 12-pound dogs on my lap because they would not stop barking at another dog across the street. And so, we do different things in this era, don't we? It's hard to believe, but we do. So I'm very delighted that you're joining us for this hour of the program. We are broadcasting from the Policy Genius Studios. Policy Genius, I should say the Policy Genius Virtual Studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. I am so delighted to resurrect this interview with my friend Diana Henriques. She's a writer at the New York Times. She wrote the quintessential Bernie Madoff book. It was called Wizard of Lies. Lots of awards. One of the leading books of the time about Bernie Madoff's life and what happened. And it's such a compelling story because Bernie Madoff is a wild character. And in the beginning part of my interview with Diana, we talk about why she was drawn to this story, and we'll get into how the movie was made on HBO. So here is our interview from a few years back with Diana Henriques. Let's talk a little bit about why you were drawn to the Bernie Madoff story in the first place. Now, you covered it for the Times, right?
I did. I covered it really from the minute that the headlines moved. But I had actually covered Bernie before, Jill. I don't know if we discussed this earlier, but when I was working for the Times, and Madoff's firm pioneered after-hours trading. So if you wanted to know what was happening in the stock market after the big board closed, who are you going to call? You're going to call the Madoff trading desk. So he was name in my Rolodex, to pull up an ancient term. But I had also covered a couple of stories in which he figured more prominently in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I knew who he was. I knew who the world thought he was.
And the world thought he was this very charming, smart guy, part of the infrastructure of not just the trading organization, but he held positions of power.
He did. He was incredibly influential in the evolution of NASDAQ. He was incredibly forward-looking in terms of automated computer trading, trading platforms, electronic trading platforms. Funny story, the minute I saw the headline about him, the first drill for a reporter is you look at the archives. What was the last thing we wrote about Bernie Madoff? And the first story that came up in the New York Times electronic archives was a story about a partnership that Madoff, that had been announced between to build a new electronic trading platform between Madoff and Citibank, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, and I think J.P. Morgan. These unbelievable firms. And I'm saying, my goodness, this man has just been arrested. So it's a classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story. I knew Dr. Jekyll. I knew the Bernie Madoff that he was proud to say he was. The Madoff who was respected by regulators, who was not only admired, but actually really liked by colleagues on the street. He and his brother Peter were well-liked and popular figures on the street. No one knew the Dr. Hyde facet of his life until it exploded on that day in December 2008.
And so when you saw the headline, did something in you click? Did you say, oh, my God, that actually does make sense, or not?
No. The criminality never made sense, but I'll tell you what happened. I've covered lots of criminals. I've covered lots of fraudsters, even lots of Ponzi schemers. And nothing in those stories hooked me the way this did, because by the end of that first night, we knew that Madoff had been turned in to the FBI by his two sons. And that fact, without knowing yet that the sons were blameless, without knowing whether they were his accomplices or his innocent, horrified offspring, it was Shakespearean.
Totally.
Truly. At that point, either they were his accomplices and had betrayed him, or they were innocent of this crime and had been so devastatingly betrayed. So from a human standpoint, that was a facet of this fraud that I had not seen in all my earlier years of covering white-collar crime. And I think that's one of the reasons that this story has such staying power. The depth of this betrayal, it's as old as Jacob and Esau. The fact that someone you love and trust that much would betray you that devastatingly. And consider the times, too, Jill. The whole country felt like they had trusted Wall Street, and Wall Street had betrayed them.
Right, he's the metaphor.
Suddenly, he is the face of that betrayal.
Right. So when you started covering the story, so that's the end of 2008, it's 2009, things are happening. Talk about how you got access to him. Like, what was happening? Were you sending him love letters in prison? Like, what was happening? Hi, love D. What was going on?
Well, it wasn't quite like that, but I was regularly writing him letters. I had tried to get in to see him even before he was incarcerated. And then as soon as he was down at the Metropolitan Correction Center downtown in Manhattan, tried again. His lawyers just kept throwing up bars. Absolutely not, not until he's sentenced. And then, of course, in June of 2009, he was sentenced to 150 years in federal prison. When he arrived at the facility in North Carolina, I started writing him. And every time one of the new books about the Madoff scandal came out, one of the new quickie books would come out, I'd write him again. And I'd say, if you don't ever tell your side of the story, this two-dimensional cartoon figure here is all the world is ever going to know about you. And if that's what you want your grandchildren to be able to learn about what happened, then fine. But if you want a deeper, more human picture, I hope you'll talk to me. And I just kept that same message over and over again. And ultimately, I think in the fall of 2009, he sent me a little short handwritten note saying that he didn't feel like he could talk to anyone yet because of the civil litigation affecting his family in the bankruptcy court. But if he ever did, I would be at the top of his list. That's the Madoff charm working there, The following spring, I think the headlines had eased a bit. He felt like perhaps his family had moved a little bit away from the whipping post, and his lawyer let me know that he was reconsidering his decision.
We'll get back to our interview with Diana Henriques in just a moment. If you would like to contact us and ask a question, feel free to do so. Our email address, askjill@jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, send us an email. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. You can also go to our website, jillonmoney.com, and poke around there, see what's available. We are resurrecting some of our favorite interviews that we have conducted and maybe trying to tie it into entertainment or feeling good. This one's entertainment. Presume that you can get HBO on demand. And if so, then you'll be able to find the fabulous movie Wizard of Lies. It is a movie about Bernie Madoff and his life. And it is adapted from the book called Wizard of Lies by our guest, Diana Henriques. She's fantastic, New York Times writer, brilliant. As we get into this, you'll hear some unbelievable stories about her interactions with Bernie Madoff, how she visited him in prison. Unbelievable. So here is more of our interview with Diana Henriques. When you start interviewing him, and you do it over the course of a number of months, what is he trying to convince you of?
Well, we had some bones of contention. And one of his big missions, I think, one of his big goals was to persuade me that this fraud actually started when he claimed it started. And I do not believe that. He claimed that he had been an honest investment manager until 1993, and then pressures of withdrawals and bad markets forced him into this Ponzi scheme. I don't buy that for a minute, and I've told him over and over again that it just doesn't make any sense. I think it was a Ponzi scheme at least by the mid-1980s, and of course the prosecutors claimed in later trials of other people that it was a Ponzi scheme as early as 1978.
Wow.
So that was one of his missions, I think, was to try to make the case. And his goal for that, I think, was to try to shelter as much of his family's income as possible by
drawing that
line and saying everything before here was clean money. They're entitled to keep that. It didn't work, of course, but I think that was one of his goals. But I also think we have to remember the scale of the narcissism involved here. I have never met a con man who didn't think he could con me. I've never met a con man who didn't think that if he could just sit down and talk with me and explain it all to me, I'd get his side. And Madoff was no different than that. I think he felt that he could persuade me that his version of the truth, his view of himself as a embattled money manager who just got on the wrong side of the market and was swept away before he could make things right again. And who is being vilified by all these greedy investors who should be grateful for all the money he made for them over the years. That was the Madoff theme song, and he, I think, thought that he could sell that.
You know what's very interesting, though, about his scheme versus so many other Ponzi schemes, which is he never promised to hit a home run. And that was sort of like the sheer brilliance that was underlying the scheme.
And don't underestimate the brilliance of Ponzi schemers. I think they have an annual conference where they have workshops on how to do it. And there's the Madoff Technique now. The Madoff method of running a Ponzi scheme is exactly that. Never promise pie in the sky. Never pressure people to invest right this minute. In fact, if possible, tell them you just don't even want their money until they're begging you to take it. That was Madoff's method. And never make it sound too good to be true. There's a great line that Pat Huddleston, the fraud analyst, observed about Madoff. He said, if it sounds too good to be true, you're dealing with an amateur.
Oh, my God, that's great.
And it's so great because Bernie was a pro. He could never have persuaded two retired chairmen of Merrill Lynch, retired CEOs of Merrill Lynch, the retired chairman of Morgan Stanley, the famous economist of Salomon Brothers. He never could have persuaded those people to buy into what we think of as the classic Ponzi scheme.
Right. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme.
No, never was. It was just a conservative, steady, not volatile investment. It was sort of like the hedge fund world's money market fund. You know, it was liquid, far more liquid than most hedge funds were. And that, of course, was its undoing because when the financial crisis hit in 2008, lots of his biggest investors had to pull money out, not because they thought he was a fraud, but because it was the most liquid asset they had.
So all those redemptions come in, and
he does not have the money to cover them.
When you first went in to start the interview process with him, did you think the kids were guilty? Did you have an opinion?
I did have an opinion, and the answer was emphatically no.
Really?
Well, look at the circumstances. Both of his sons were represented by a single attorney. That raised eyebrows immediately among my friends in the defense bar because they said, well, if those two men have any criminal liability, they need separate lawyers. They need separate counsel because the best deal for one of them might be to roll over on the other one to testify against his brother, which would, of course, just amplify the Shakespearean tragedy here. But that didn't happen. They didn't get separate counsel. They continued to be represented by the same lawyer. So that gave you something you had to explain away, and I could never explain it away. Also, as I became more convinced from my research, and this is before I interviewed Madoff, as I became more convinced from my research that this fraud was much older than he was claiming, that it had gone back at least 8 to 10 years earlier than he claimed. Well, his sons were in high school.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Junior high. So how did that conversation go when one of them comes out of the University of Michigan and the other one comes out of the Wharton School and decide to go to work for Dad? And he calls them in and says, look, Mark, Andy, I have to tell you something. Got a great little wholesale trading business here, and downstairs we're running a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, Dad, that sounds like fun. Sure, we'll hang out. It never made emotional logic that he would have exposed them to that fraud. Once you knew it was already in progress, the day they arrived at the firm. At that point, it became impossible, really.
But not with his brother, because his brother was there from the beginning.
His brother was there from the beginning. And, of course, Peter Madoff did plead guilty to a set of securities fraud charges and is serving a prison term as a result of his failure to police what his brother was doing. He was the chief compliance officer at the firm, a lawyer by training. He really had no excuse for not having uncovered this fraud, but he insisted right up to his sentencing hearing that he had not known about the Ponzi scheme. He had simply trusted his brother and done what his brother had told him. And what his brother told him to do put him in that legal peril.
Now, what happened to Peter's daughter, Shana? How did she end up in this? Because she was in the compliance department also.
She was the deputy counsel to the firm. No charges were ever brought against her. Like every member of the Madoff family, she faced civil litigation from the bankruptcy trustee claiming assets. The theory there being that everything that anybody who worked for the firm got were the fruits of Bernie's crime.
We'll get back to our interview with Wizard of Lies author Diana Henriques. During the break, why don't you hop on over to JillOnMoney.com. That's our website. And there you can actually subscribe to our sister broadcast. It's called Jill on Money. It's a podcast. We'll be right back.
401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life, but also holds your hand during a pandemic. And we are here to try to entertain you and give you information, and no better intersection of that than my interview with Diana Henriques. She is the author of a book called Wizard of Lies. It's really the quintessential accounting of the Bernie Madoff scandal and really Bernie Madoff himself and his family. The book was adapted into a great movie on HBO called Wizard of Lies, so you're going to try to check it out, I know. And in this portion of my interview with Diana, we talk about the victims of Bernie Madoff, and we have a lot more information on them now than we did back then during the actual unfolding of the story that she wrote. So here's more of our interview with Diana Henriques.
When the bankruptcy proceedings go on, they claw back all the money. Now, are all of these investors that were Madoff investors who said, my life savings gone, has everyone recouped a bunch of money, and how much of that? I mean, years later now.
Well, this all has to be said in the context of some investors weren't eligible to recover anything because they were indirect investors, several layers removed from Madoff himself. Other investors were not eligible to recover anything because over the life of their Madoff account, they had taken out more than they had originally
That's
put
like the
in.
Wilpons.
Yes, and so they had to give money back. They got no money in recovery. And then the big caveat, what is being returned to the investors who are eligible to recover money is their original capital.
Not what they thought they made.
Not what they thought they had made over time. So if you were a good little school teacher, and I've talked with one good little school teacher putting her money with Madoff, and you put in over time your $200,000 in savings, and you watched it grow to $1 million, $1.5 million, and you think you are set for retirement. You're going to buy the RV. You're going to cruise the state parks and the federal parks. That's going to be your retirement. And then you discover, A, it's all gone, and B, if you recover everything you're eligible for, it's your $200,000.
You get your basis back.
You get your basis back. And so, yes, the small investors have all been made whole in terms of getting their investors back. By that, I mean those who were entitled to recover $1 million or less. They have all gotten their capital back. which is a remarkable outcome for a Ponzi scheme. Among the larger investors, who, of course, in many cases have small investors relying on them for recovery, I think we're around 57 to 60 cents on the dollar in recovery now. But here we are, 2017, and this liquidation recovery process is not yet complete.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. We don't really have a competent structure in this country to deal with a financial fraud on this scale, particularly a cross-border fraud. There are claimants in Luxembourg, claimants in Spain, claimants in France and Brazil and London who are all being treated differently because their countries have different bankruptcy schemes. And so a global fraud like this, it's sort of like the financial regulators of the world just throw up their hands and say, okay, dive in and grab what you can.
Right. Good luck. Let's get back to Bernie for a second. So you said he's the ultimate narcissist. A lot of times we heard these terms that were thrown around to describe him. He's a sociopath. He's a narcissist. Did you actually talk to a shrink about what you thought who this guy really was clinically?
I did, Jill. I would not just one. I was invited to meet with the psychiatric faculty's grand rounds at a major New York hospital to talk about Bernie Madoff. They had read the book and they were eager to discuss my impressions of him and to quiz me about it, and I was eager to quiz them about what these traits and experiences and life stories suggested. But I think we need to be careful about looking for the easy diagnosis here. Yes, without question, Bernie Madoff is a sociopath. But, if you read Walter Isaacson's great biography, Steve Jobs was probably a sociopath. And he didn't, he created one of the most iconic brands in American history. So saying someone is a sociopath doesn't explain why they ran the biggest Ponzi scheme in history.
So why did he?
Well, here's my armchair diagnosis.
Let's do it. Go, doctor.
I had an odd snippet of a conversation with Bernie. If you'll indulge me, let me tell you. Every author wants that aha moment that they can describe in the book. When did you realize? When did the hammer fall? When did the blinding flash? So I said, okay, Bernie, when did you first realize that your Ponzi scheme was going to fail? His answer was, it didn't fail. And I said, what? We're sitting here behind bars in the visiting room in Butner, North Carolina prison. So I said, what do you mean? He said, no, it didn't fail. And he goes on to recount all of these bold-faced names who wanted to still invest with him. He claimed he could have raised enough money to cover all of these withdrawals. He had just gotten tired of the whole tap dance and decided to let the fraud fall apart. He had not failed. He had quit. And as I thought about that, as I reflected on that in the final draft of the book, it just struck me that this is a man to this day who cannot admit failure at anything. So I think so long as Madoff was able to be a genius, to win all the approval a narcissist needs by being an honest investment manager, and there were years when the market enabled him to do that, fine, he'd be an honest investment manager. But if the market didn't make it possible for him to be a genius, an admired, loved, revered genius honestly, he would be a genius dishonestly because he could not face failure, couldn't admit failure at anything. So that's there are other episodes that I mention in the book that carry that out, where faced with a crisis where he had to tell the truth and admit failure or lie,
he would
lied.
choose the lie. That's fascinating.
Okay, we'll get back to our interview with Diana Henriques in just a second. During the break, here's an idea. Go to the website, jillonmoney.com. Sign up for our free weekly newsletter. Mark does such an awesome job with that, so check it out. jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and here's the end of our interview with Diana Henriques, where I asked her, can a sociopath like Bernie Madoff have any kind of remorse? It's hard to imagine. Here's the last bit of our interview.
Before we finish up, is Bernie Madoff capable of having remorse for this or for his? I mean, even just that both sons have now died. It's horrible.
I think that was the one thing about this that really shocked him, was how the world turned on his family. And, traditionally, that was quite a departure from history. I mean, that white-collar criminals' families are almost always left alone by the media and everybody else. So this was a real aberration. I think to the extent that he is able to feel remorse, it is for the fact that he has utterly destroyed his family. A brother in jail, 2 sons dead, a wife estranged, just completely destroyed a family that he loved. The only argument that you can make that Bernie Madoff isn't a sociopath is that he did apparently love his family. But I noticed over time, Jill, that his attitude towards the investors he had hurt, the lives he had destroyed, thousands and thousands of lives, kids who had to drop out of college, family homes that had to be sold, charities that had to close their doors, as you know. Over the months and the years that we've stayed in touch, I have seen his pretense of remorse, if that's what it was, or his ability to express remorse about that damage just evaporate.
Really?
He is now kind of at the point where he thinks they still should be grateful for all he did for them back in the day. So I don't know if that's how he's protecting himself from the bottomless grief over his family. Or if, as he has said to me, and as is said by Bernie Madoff, in quotes, in the film, he has this capacity to compartmentalize his life in such rigid ways that there is a dike that's holding back that family remorse. And the only way he can keep that dike big and strong is to sustain this coldness towards his other victims. Are you in touch with him still? Yes, not frequently, but occasionally. I got a letter from him just a few months ago on an unrelated topic, and I'm on his email list at the prison, so I do occasionally correspond with him. You know, for good or ill, I am his biographer, and I have continuing responsibilities to history to understand where the rest of his life leads him, at least psychologically and mentally, to the extent that I can. Are you in touch with Ruth? I have had some conversations with Ruth. Mm-hmm. This is obviously a difficult time for her. I think she has come to understand that through no fault of her own, she has been shackled to this historic fraud. And every time it surfaces, whether through a book or a TV show or a movie or an anniversary, she's going to get dragged back out into the spotlight again. She's an incredibly resilient woman, though. I guess. And her grandchildren are a source of great comfort. She has found ways to fill her life, but and by the way, everyone should know that she has no money. I mean, everything got clawed back. Yes, she is on an allowance, basically, from the trustee, pending the settlement of the litigation that he has filed against her. A settlement with the Justice Department left her with $2.5 million. Which is not chump change. Not chump change. You could buy an annuity with it and maybe live off the income of that annuity in an earlier interest rate environment, but not now. So she was left with $2.5 million, and then the trustee promptly sued her for $44 million, which she transparently doesn't have. That litigation is still pending settlement, and when it is ultimately settled, she'll know what, if anything, she has left. But for now, she has to draw money from the trustee with the trustees' approval. So she doesn't own a home; she rents. She
Down in Florida?
No, she's living in Connecticut now, to be close to where the grandchildren are more or less centered. But she's putting one foot in front of the other, getting through the day.
Is there anyone in this whole maze of fraud that got away with something?
Well, Jill, it must be said, every Ponzi schemer has a banker who almost never catches him. The only two things you need to run a Ponzi scheme are trust and a bank account. Well, Bernie had trust, and he had a bank account. And if the bankers of the world were more scrupulous about supervising the uses that are made of their bank accounts, there would be fewer Ponzi schemes. They are the best first line of defense against a Ponzi scheme. The cash flow in and out of a Ponzi scheme slush fund is, shall I say, distinctive. And time and again, the bankers serving Bernie Madoff had their software send off a red flag that something looks odd in this account. And time and again, they made an excuse because it was Bernie. He was a big customer. They didn't want to lose that business.
Well, thanks again to Diana Henriques, who's actually been on our show a couple of times. We might have to play that other interview. She's so smart and researches everything so well. We're going to wrap up the show in just a few minutes, but during the break, why don't you send us an email? Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back. Okay, once again, you just got to love Diana Henriques. She's amazing. Check out Wizard of Lies. It's on HBO. Nab one of your friend's HBO subscriptions if you don't get it yourself. It's so worth it. Fantastic. And the book's even better. It's so good. Love her. All right. Before we go, we do want to remind you that we are broadcasting from the Policy Genius Studios. How about that? Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. Okay, Judith writes, I'm an 80-year-old single woman selling my house, and I'm downsizing to a small condo. I will be in possession of about $400,000 for about 8 months. I don't know what to do with this money while waiting for my new house to be built. I'm at a loss anytime about large sums of money, but especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. I'm scared I will not be able to get my money back if some banks fail. Should I open up 4 money markets with 4 different local banks or what? I hope you reply by email. I live in a small town with few financial advisors. Thank you so much for answering this for me. Okay, Judith, first of all, numero uno. You don't need 4, but you could use 2 because FDIC covers $250,000 per account. So you can just pick 2 different institutions, then you're covered. You can split the money between the 2, and you can essentially be protected if something bad were to happen to either or both of them. Okay? So you could do that. It's very easy. If you're comfortable in the online world, do go check out depositaccounts.com. It's an easy place if you want to do online, but if you rather walk into an institution, if you're able to actually walk in these days and open those accounts up, go ahead and do that. Just make sure that each has FDIC insurance, okay? And that'll help you out. Very good. All right. Thanks so much for listening, gang, and we have had a great show. Don't forget to check out Diana Henriques' Wizard of Lies. It's on HBO. And don't forget to check out our podcast. It's called Jill on Money. You can download it anywhere you get your podcast. That could be on Apple or Spotify, Stitcher, radio.com, or Google Play. We are so happy you join us every week, and we're grateful that you do so. We will talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.